England-Sweden 0-0 in one of the most riveting games of women's football in recent years. I mean, I think it's fair to say England dominated the first half. I mean, especially in terms of possession, but Sweden then kind of really brought themselves back into the game, kind of putting England under a lot of pressure just before the break. I did find our defence somewhat unconvincing in the second half, and Sweden kind of showed more of an attacking threat. But let's talk a little bit, I suppose, about, again, England kind of struggling in front of goal. I mean, it felt like, looking at the stats even for this game, 2 shots on target the entire time. It felt like Musovic kind of could have set up a deck chair if she wanted to at points in the game. Is that too savage, or would you agree with that, Rach?
Maybe not quite a deck chair. She had to stay pretty sharp, but I found it really interesting because I thought England's first 30 minutes or so was some really lovely football.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Soph in Lithuania at the moment doing the under-19s, and she was watching it, and I messaged her about 25-30 minutes in, and I was like, Jesus, they're playing some lovely football.
Mm-hmm.
Like, slick, quick passes, finding each other really well, making good runs, switching quickly as well, which I like, because sometimes it felt at times it's been slow and it's like coming backwards, and I thought they were playing some nice kind of forward play, good pace to it, and it was that final third. It was like 99% of what they were doing was wonderful, and that 1% was putting it in the back of the bloody goal. And it was amazing, the contrast in terms of how poor the final third was versus how everything else looked. Like, it just felt like some really lovely football. It was like Sweden couldn't get a bloody look in. You almost felt like, come on lads, like, this is a home game for them, could you not like let them have a go at the ball for a minute? And it just felt like the not conceding for Sweden massively boosted them, because then they went into that halftime, well, even before halftime, they kind of switched it the longer the game went on, and England didn't capitalise on the dominance. Sweden were like, okay, we're in here. Like, they needed to win this game, which is almost like, and you could see that in the second half, it was 2 different approaches from the teams. England were like, we just need to weather this, which I fucking hate that attitude in a match, because then it's very nerve-wracking when you're watching. Whereas Sweden were like, we need to throw absolutely everything at them. And that's what it felt like. It just felt like a boxer going, I just need to weather these blows and stay on my feet. That's what it felt like from England. They were against the ropes at times, and somehow there was no knockout punch.
But it was a really interesting approach, I think, because I think in the pre-match press conference with Serena earlier this week, you kind of got the sense that, you know, she was very much like, she was asked about whether she wanted to just get the draw and kind of see out the game and just make it one of those, like, just, you know, very defensive mindset. But she said, you know, we go into every game wanting to win. And, you know, I had that in the first half. And then, like you said, the second half, it felt like it was just batten down the hatches and see out the game, which became a very cagey game. And I think having that kind of mindset then allowed Sweden the belief that actually they could get into the game and make it more dangerous. So I couldn't really understand the approach, because for me it felt like, well, the best form of defence is attack, which is what they were doing in the first half. But it did become incredibly hairy. And I mean, even Leah Williamson after the game, she was saying, we don't make it easy for ourselves when we don't score. And that is probably the headline point of that game. I mean, had they actually converted some of those chances, with Ireland beating France, it meant that 1 goal would have put England on top of the group and given them a better seeding next summer. So regardless of the fact that obviously qualification is secured, the extra goal would have given them that kind of extra advantage. So there was still something to play for, not just the draw. But I think I've got to be really honest. I think I am a little bit disappointed with Russo. I do think maybe that the tenacity that we saw in those first 5 minutes against Ireland, I didn't necessarily see her kind of getting into the same kind of, I don't know, mindset, and kind of like, yeah, it is tenacity for me. But I think it is hard to say kind of what she does off the ball. I think when you're watching it from home, I appreciate that her off the ball work is absolutely incredible, phenomenal rates. Obviously, you've been to quite a few of their games recently, but I do think it's kind of missing that extra 1%, that extra like want to give it like a little toe to just get it into the back of the net.
I feel like it's another area of a striker's game, right? There's so many different areas of a striker's game, and if I was a striker, I wouldn't want the finishing to be the bit that I really needed to work on. I'd rather be like banging in the goals and going, I really need to work hard on my on dropping back here and supporting, or like, you know, all of that kind of stuff. My hold up play, my press. She's got all of the hold up play, all of the press, all of that stuff. It's the finishing at the moment that she's lacking. And, you know, we were talking about this before we started recording, and I think England at the moment are lacking a bit of depth in that role. And, you know, when the likes of Beth England return, players like that. Once they've got, I also feel like once players have a bit of a pre-season under their belt, we start to have a bit more competition in that role in training. You'll start to see, I think, better finishing, better play from those positions because there's competition there. You're being pushed a bit more. And I feel like at the moment, maybe Russo doesn't have enough of that competition and training because she knows she's going to start, right? Whereas if you've got someone snapping at your heels, a different type of forward, like a Beth England, who's very different, or a Nike Beaver-Jones, who can be direct, you know, that will start to push you a bit more. So there is an element of that, but I agree, yeah. And I think the more it goes on, I'm sure this is the case for many strikers, the more it goes on and the more it's kind of highlighted, the harder it is to, like, yeah, you know, you just want to bang in a hat trick at some point and be like, okay, I've put that to bed now, you know,
Shut
I've
up,
got my
haters.
boots on. Oh, look, and this is the thing, like, it's not hatred, it's factual. We're looking at a team that are having a lot of possession, creating opportunities, getting into a team's final third and not being able to create anything from it. And realistically, they're good enough players up there to be able to create. So it's not hate, it's like, it's trying to identify what the reasons are and the areas that the team might be lacking. I mean, I think England looked knackered in the second half, Jesus. And I put in like one of the WhatsApp groups, I was like, did Serena not want to make any changes because she's afraid of like disrupting? Because I'm happy for her to disrupt whatever this is, because it needs a bit of disrupting, it needs a bit of spark. And like, it did just feel like they were like, okay, we're in a draw here, we just need to hang on. And like, I saw Niamh Charles go on, I was like, oh fuck, they're playing for a draw here. And Sweden looked like they had a sneaky goal in them.
Absolutely.
They always look like they've got a sneaky goal in them, does Sweden.
I think for me, I don't think there was enough kind of energy that England went into the second half with. And I could kind of see, I mean, it was really interesting to see, like, sometimes the camera would kind of pan to Wiegman and she was so animated on the touchline, especially in the second half. Like, it's very rare that you kind of get that really obvious frustration for her, as kind of errors seem to kind of creep in a little bit more. But I've got to agree, I don't think necessarily, I think it could have benefited from there just being a bit of a, I don't know, like a revamp of like what they were doing, a change of structure, a change of personnel. It felt flat, I think, for me. Yeah, I mean, who would you have liked to see sort of come up? Because I've got to agree with you. I mean, the subs that she made towards the end of the game seemed very kind of like defensive. Let's just kind of see it out. And I think at that point, when you're sort of 10 minutes from the end, fine. But I think the game could have done with a little bit more security earlier on.
It's a tough one, right? And I think what we saw in the Euros in 2022 was there was a real belief and like she trusted every player on that bench, it seemed, so that if she had to put them on, she put them on. And I can understand that in a major tournament you're more willing to roll the dice because you need to win games, right? And it felt like there was an element of, do I risk it? Do I risk it and make a change and then potentially that disrupts things and we lose and we have to go through playoffs? Or do we hang on because at the moment they've still not scored and we seem to be managing to keep them out? And there was an element of almost like, did she not trust that she could bring people on and be able to either sustain or improve what they were doing? And I think, now there's a year almost until the Euros now, and I think it will give England time to try new players, bring new players in, try new things, develop relationships better. I guess go over things more, that it becomes a bit more second nature and there's more of that kind of understanding built across the team. But in terms of, you know, changes, we saw so many changes in the Ireland game, early changes as well. And I was sitting there going, there needs to be, someone needs to come on in the 50th, 60th minute to change this, you know, to give that spark up front. England need to get a goal to kind of calm things down a bit. Fran Kirby, I thought, even though she came on near the end, had that spark.
Yeah,
you know,
for sure.
Even her or Park, you know, I thought Toon was really good in the first half. I thought she fell away in the second. She was losing possession in midfield. I thought, you know, England would just kept going wide and sending crosses in. At times, Hemp was sending in crosses, nobody in the bloody box. Like, it was absolutely wasted. And I thought England could have done with being a bit more direct and having people penetrate a bit more through the middle rather than constantly going wide and giving that option. So Park would have been a good option. And I think what I like about it, the young players, is a lot of them come on with a lot of bravery and no fear. But it just felt like there was that little bit of fear of changing things.
100%.
Do you know what I mean?
Like, I mean, you did kind of predict last pod that it was good that Lucy Bronze and Millie Bright would start, and they did. But like you said, sort of Ella Toone came in for Jess Park, and obviously you're kind of saying that, you know, Jess Park maybe should have had more of a chance in the game.
Maybe in the second half.
But who do we think? How do you sort of? I suppose, is there kind of a role, or how do we kind of decide who would be the best fit, I suppose, for that number 10 role? Or actually, is it a case of, you know, they each bring something different to the game, and it's just a case of determining what strengths best fit the opponent that they're about to play?
I think you're probably right. I think there is an element of what the game needs because, you know, you've got Fran Kirby, you've got Ella Toone, you've got Jess Park. Mm-hmm. LJ can play in that role as well. And I do think they all offer different things. And I thought what we saw with Ella Toone in the first half was the relationships she has with players on the pitch, particularly Lessie, but I thought she was finding the ball really well, she was finding players really well, she was making some lovely passes, she was facilitating, you know, quick switching across in front of the box and stuff like that. And that was great, and she offers that, and I think it's recognising when other teams, I guess, suss that out. Mm-hmm. So I think England do have options. I think you're right, there could be an element of what does the game need, but also knowing that there's that level of quality on the bench in that position. Mm-hmm. So if it needs to change, it should, and I do think it could have changed.
Let's touch a little bit now on Hampton in goal. Obviously, she started
I want to hear your opinions on this.
I will give you my opinions, to be quite frank. I mean, we've got in a question from Petra. She asked on Instagram, what do you think about her performance? Clean sheet, okay, but she looked shaky. And to be honest, I've got to agree. And you know how I feel about goalkeepers. I always want to protect them from any kind of criticism. But I don't think there was that consistency that I saw in the Ireland game. I think she made a few kind of slip-ups, a few errors, and I think it really unsettled her for the rest of the game. I mean, in particular, there was a long-range shot. It was a fair few yards outside the edge of the box. And she kind of, from the TV angle, it looked like the shot had curved and gone top bins. And I was like, oh my God, the adjustment in that is absolutely incredible. And the way she's dived and landed, I was like, wow, what an incredible save. And they played it back on the replay. And the shot was around head height. It was an easy catch. It was a little bit of a kind of... there was a swerve on it that I think made it more difficult to kind of get a clean take on it. But it was... The drama of the save didn't equate to what the kick actually was, and then it put England in a really dangerous position because instead of actually powering it out to a safe space, it dropped pretty much in front of goal. And if it wasn't for, I think, Bronze clearing it away, that would have been a Sweden goal, and that would have honestly, I think that would have really, really affected her, because had that goal gone in, I think that's England's qualification sort of out the window until November, December time. So yeah, and I think from that moment on, I think like when she was trying to come out to claim balls, a couple of crosses that came in, I didn't get that sense that she'd kind of let those errors go. I think she kind of held it with her, and I didn't see that same kind of confidence in her for the rest of the game. So I think people are kind of asking, you know, is Hampton in a position to kind of take over Earps consistently and kind of take that number one spot? And for me, whilst I think she is 100% very close to that, and I think it's really good that Earps has this competition and she's got a youngster kind of nipping at her heels, I think consistency wise, Earps for me has that confidence. I know that she's going to go out, she might make an error, all goalkeepers do, but she will recover so much more quickly. And I still back Earps, to be honest. I mean, Rach, do you agree or think actually that Hannah's done enough to kind of usurp Earps?
No, and I don't mean it in she's not good, like she's an unbelievable keeper, but I don't think she's done enough to pull that number one jersey away from Mary. But as you say, I think it's massive competition, right? It's a position where should Mary get injured in the 8th minute of a game that they really need to win, which she has done, you feel confident in the fact that Hannah Hampton can go out there between the sticks and put in a good shift, right? But yeah, she looked shaky at times. She dropped a few crosses. Her distribution wasn't brilliant, which is one of her key attributes, is her distribution. I think she struggled a little bit with that at times, and I think you're right, it is when a nervy moment happens, those areas of her game kind of dip a little bit. Her and Millie Bright were often getting in each other's way, which I thought was interesting, given they play with each other. Now, I appreciate Millie was injured for a good bit of Chelsea's season, and Hannah Hampton didn't play all their games, but that was interesting. Is that a communication thing? You know, at times they were jumping into each other. But look, she made some great saves at the same time. There was a wonderful save she made from Angeldal, which she saw super late, and she got down so quick to get two hands to it and to parry it out wide. And, you know, it's those moments of brilliance where you're like, that's the type of goalkeeper she is. And it's working out those mistakes in her game, or when she does make a mistake, as you say, to not let it affect her in the way that it does. And I think that's an area, obviously, with experience, Mary Earps has developed.
Absolutely. And I think, even after in the post-match conference, Wiegman was saying, she was very professional. This is about Earps in response to kind of like questions about like how she felt about kind of Hannah Hampton stepping in for the last 2 games. And she said she's very professional. Competition's on. It's really on. They are both incredible, talented goalkeepers that we're really happy with. There's 3 months until our next window. They're going back to their clubs. We will see how that goes first, and we'll see when they come back in October. So watch this space, because I think that choice, if they're both fully fit in October, I think that choice could be potentially how we start to see who is going to be taking, I think, the number 1
And
shirt.
it's funny, I think people are desperate for a bit of drama. Like, it's almost like they expect Vegan to be like, oh, well, she actually took it really badly and like had a hissy fit in the dressing room and threw a lot of shit everywhere. Like, of course she took it professionally. I mean, and at the same time, like, she has up till now had an absolutely incredible career with England, winning the Euros, Golden Glove at a World Cup, saving a penalty in a final. Like, Mary's isn't worried about kind of, is she a good enough goalkeeper? Do you know what I mean? It's the nature of the game that you're going to have people snapping at your heels, and I think that competition only drives players and improves them.
Well, Rach, talking of drama, what dropped yesterday? I think it was Lucy Bronze to Chelsea. What the actual?
Was it?
I think it was. Yeah, I don't know whether anyone missed it.
Worst kept secret in the world.
I honestly. There were so many rumours around where she might go, and I think Chelsea seemed to be kind of the front runner in that. But I think seeing her in that Chelsea shirt, and obviously Chelsea not too long ago dropped their kind of like that flame blue shirt, and like Lucy Bronze sitting on the chair casually, and then doing this like lovely PR campaign with Millie Bright picking her up on the first day of training and taking her to the session. Do we... But obviously, like, Lucy Bronze has kind of weathered a bit of criticism, I think, recently over sort of like whether she drives too far up. And this is more in the England setup, I suppose, and sort of leaves and exposed things at the back. She's obviously coming towards the kind of latter stages of her career. But what do you think is the inspiration behind this signing? Is there an element for Chelsea of kind of wanting a big name? Like, I'm not saying they've signed her for the shirt style. She's obviously an incredible player, but there will be a desire to pack out Stamford Bridge next season, especially when they've kind of struggled to get bums on seats, and Bronze brings with her like this massive fan base.
Yeah, I don't really think that factors into Chelsea's recruitment process.
It 100% will play some kind of factor on a commercial basis.
How many Instagram followers does she have? I saw that. Sorry, that just makes me think of the Alicia Lehmann move to Juventus, and I can't remember which account it was that put it up, but they were basically like, Alicia Lehmann is going to Juventus, like super kind of commercial marketing kind of opportunity there with all the Instagram followers she brings, not necessarily needed on the pitch. And I was just a bit like, oh, that was such a savage blow, you didn't need to include in there. But it is an area that I guess Lucy brings. I think the main thing is she brings experience, she brings that winning mentality. She's an absolute workhorse in training. She'll drive standards, and I think that's a valuable asset to have in a squad when you're bringing in new players, which, they have done. They've not brought in loads, but there's feckin' loads of them. There's going to have to be players going out at some point. So, it'll be a little bit disjointed at times. And I think having, that maturity and that experience of a player who's gone around to big clubs and played at big clubs and won at big clubs will massively help. It's an interesting one. It's one of those, like, I didn't really think Chelsea needed her, but at the same time, who wouldn't want Lucy Bronze?
I think that's kind of what I was getting at. Like, Chelsea already have enough players. It feels a bit surplus to get Bronze. It's an amazing signing, but it did feel a bit surplus to have someone like
But then
Bronze.
You don't know who's going to stay and what players, all that kind of jazz. But yeah, it was interesting. I saw a lot of people being like, oh God, it's so weird to see Lucy Bronze in blue. And it was like, she was at Man City for ages. It was slightly lighter blue, but it's still blue.
It's a dark blue. It's a Chelsea. There's a difference with the Chelsea blue.
It's not even a proper Chelsea blue, is it? Their new shirt's like a lighter colour.
Yeah, but it's
not
like
a traditional
blue.
royal blue.
It's that kind of. It's weird. It is still a bit weird. Right. Anyway, let's get back. We did take a small diversion, but I had to because it was such massive news. What does England's qualifying campaign say about their chances of defending the title next summer? It has been an incredibly tough group with 2 other nations from the world's top 6 in it. England won 3, drew 2 and lost 1, which, to be fair, is not a bad little record. We might not have done it in the most incredible fashion, but we got the job done. But yeah, what do we think about their chances next summer, obviously holding on to their title?
I mean, I don't think the qualifiers are a massive indicator, to be honest. I don't know if that's controversial, but like, there's so much time between they've qualified and the actual tournament. Yeah, it's not like they kind of qualified in March, April, or kind of even November, and the tournament's in 6-7 months. Like, it's a year away. A lot can happen in a year. There's going to be an actual pre-season for players for like what feels like the first time in ages. There's not going to be an England game until October. There's 5 international windows before the Euros. So much time for players to stake a claim, for new players to make a name for themselves. So it's kind of hard for the qualifiers to be an indicator for any team. I don't think any European team has really come out from this going, wow, where did they come from? Or what a qualifier they had. I mean, Spain are losing to teams you don't expect them to lose to. Germany are, I think there's a lot of fatigue across Europe.
Yeah.
Everyone's probably glad this feckin' competition, this qualifiers is over. Like, they're probably sick of it now. Like, July, what the fuck? Like, there was definitely some players on both teams that looked like they were not up to match fitness, understandably, and not as sharp as they normally are. So I don't feel like this is a massive indicator. I think that's a question we need to look at the beginning of next year, where we're like, how do we think England are looking compared to how other squads are doing? There's got to be friendlies between now and then. I'm really keen to see what type of teams they play in those friendlies. But yeah, it's not like, there's a real expectation. You win the Euros, you go to a final in the World Cup, you just have to be amazing all the time, and nothing less will do. And I've seen some really interesting reporting where it's like, England were of course drawn in the group of death, but were expected to come through unscathed. And I'm like, were they though? Like, the whole point of the Nations League is that it's more difficult. England had drawn difficult teams to play against, France and Sweden. I saw some about like, oh, remember the last time we played Sweden in the Euros and it was 4-0, and you're like, well, that was a while ago. First of all, different circumstances. I remember the first 20 minutes of that game in the Euros, and that was not an easy, calm, free-flowing game of football. That was a nervy game of football, and I do think Sweden are the type of team that if they hold you off for the first half, it's a different second half. And I think once England had gotten that goal in the Euros, got the early goal in the second half, different story, right? I think they struggle to have a plan B, Sweden. And I think the other night, they didn't necessarily need a plan B. They just weathered the storm for the first 30-35 minutes and came out all guns blazing in the second half. So there also needs to be that level of kind of, realistically, a team is never going to be at the top level all the time. There's going to be issues, and England have some issues. And I think that hopefully there's enough time now for them to work through those issues.
100%. I think you always have to stay humble in those moments. Like, I think you have to appreciate that there probably is an expectation, but that is built off the fact of, we have been doing so well in previous years. I think the talent on the squads, the young talent that we see coming through, replacing some of the older talent, I think there is that expectation because the talent is there. Like, we have an incredible manager, we have an incredible setup, we've got the youth pathways in place. I mean, our underage
other
groups
teams improve.
Are filtering into the England setup. So I do think that expectation is warranted, but unscathed is a bit of it's always going to be a challenge. I don't think it was never going to be a breeze in that group, 100%. But Rach,
I mean, to be fair, everyone wrote Ireland off, didn't they? And look what happened.
Well, this leads me
again
nicely into probably one of your favourite sections of the podcast. We have to talk about Ireland because they ended their campaign on a ridiculously high note. Having lost all 5 of their previous qualifiers, they absolutely stunned group winners France in Cork on Tuesday, beating them 3-1. Is this a bit of a stupid question, Rach? How are you feeling about that win?
That was absolutely ridiculous. And the way it's been like off the back of 5 losses, and I'm like, of course they've come off the back of 5 losses. Have you seen their group? Like, we went into this knowing what to expect from this group and knowing we were massive underdogs. I think they've shown up in every game. I think, bar maybe the 3-0 loss to Sweden, which even that I don't think was reflective of the game. I think they've put in a serious shift in every match. I think every team has come out of that. After the first game with Ireland, they thought, right, this isn't a game that we can just assume we're going to win. And I think that's a massive credit to the team. I appreciate that France had obviously made a lot of changes. They'd qualified, they've got Olympics to think about, but a France second string team should beat Ireland with the quality and depth they have in that squad. They brought on a big number of their big names in the 60th minute. Plenty of time for them to turn the game around, and they weren't able to. And I think that is a credit to the Irish squad. I'm really glad that the change to the lineup. I thought that was a much more impactful lineup, and is probably why we saw Ireland going forward so much. They could have had more. Mm-hmm. They had more shots on target than France, which is crazy. And their shot creation to shots on target conversion rate was really good as well. And bloody hell, there were good goals too. There was not a scrappy goal in sight. That second goal from Julianne Russell, who's having an unbelievable comeback, serious comeback, was incredible. She set up the first goal as well, and Anna Patton topping it off at the end as well. I just thought was incredible, massive boost from going into the playoffs, I should say.
Literally, there was so much incredible, beautiful press around Julianne Russell scoring her second goal in her second game after returning to the Ireland squad since 2020 and having a baby. There was this beautiful picture of her with her young daughter kind of celebrating the win after the game, which I thought was absolutely, it was just one of those really heartwarming moments.
And Denise O'Sullivan being the one to score the first goal in Cork unreal. Apparently the noise in the stadium was, I was chatting to some of the Irish journalists, was as loud the last time they heard that kind of feeling was when they were in Australia. So that was pretty cool.
Well, we will see them back again. They are in the playoffs and the draw is taking place tomorrow at 12 o'clock. England can now fully focus on their preparation for Switzerland. They will find out their group stage opponents in the draw on Monday, the 16th of December at 5 o'clock, which we will obviously cover in many, many months' time.